who, by the way, they don't have an obligation to the shareholders of OpenAI. They have an obligation to the greater public good. That's just how it's set up. It's a weird board structure. So that board is completely disempowered. You've basically got a situation where all the leverage has been taken out. Sam May's gone to Microsoft. Satya's supporting him, and they kind of see the writing on the wall. They're like,
and the staff increasingly messaging that they're going to go along. Yeah,
that was an important ingredient, right? Yeah. So around this time, OpenAI, there's this letter that starts to circulate, and it's gathering more and more signatures, and it's people saying, "Hey, we want Sam Altman back." And at first, it's a couple hundred people, so 700, 800 odd people in the organization by this time. 100, 200, 300 signatures. And then when we talked to some of our friends at OpenAI, we're like, this got to like 90% of the company, 95% of the company signed this letter, and the pressure was overwhelming, and that helped bring Sam Altman back. But one of the questions was like, how many people actually signed this letter because they wanted to? And how many signed it because what happens when you cross 50%? Now it becomes easier to count the people who didn't sign. And as you see that number of signatures start to creep upward, there's more and more pressure on the remaining people to sign. And so this is something that we've seen is just like structurally OpenAI has changed over time to go from the kind of safety-oriented company it at one point was. And then as they've scaled more and more, they've brought in more and more product people, more and more people interested in accelerating. And they've been bleeding more and more of their safety-minded people, kind of treadmilling them out. The character of the organizations sort of fundamentally shifted. So the OpenAI of 2019, with all of its impressive commitments to safety and whatnot, might not be the OpenAI of today. That's very much at least the vibe that we get when we talk to people there.
Yep.
Now, I wanted to bring it back to the lab that you're saying was not adequately secure. What would it take to make that data and those systems adequately secure? How much resources would be required to do that, and why didn't they do that?
It is a resource and prioritization issue. So it is like safety and security ultimately come out of margin, right? It's like profit margin, effort margin, like how many people you can dedicate. So in other words, you've got a certain pot of money or a certain amount of revenue coming in. You have to do an allocation. Some of that revenue goes to the computers that are just driving this stuff. Some of that goes to the folks who are, building the next generation of models. Some of that goes to cybersecurity. Some of it goes to safety. You have to do an allocation of who gets what. The problem is that the more competition there is in the space, the less margin is available for everything, right? So if you're one company building a scaled AI thing, you might not make the right decisions, but you'll at least have the margin available to make the right decisions. So it becomes the decision maker's question. But when a competitor comes in, when two competitors come in, when more and more competitors come in, your ability to make decisions outside of just scale as fast as possible for short-term revenue and profit gets compressed and compressed and compressed the more competitors enter the field. That's what competition is. That's the effect it has. And so when that happens, the only way to re-inject margin into that system is to go one level above and say, okay, there has to be some sort of regulatory authority or like some higher authority that goes, okay, this margin is important. Let's put it back. Either let's directly support and invest both maybe time, capital, talent. So for example, the U.S. government has but perhaps the best cyber defense, cyber offense talent in the world. That's potentially supportive. Okay. And also just, having a regulatory floor around, well, here's, the minimum of best practices you have to have if you're going to have models above this level of capability. That's kind of what you have to do. But they're locked into, the race kind of has its own logic. And no, it might be true that no individual lab wants this. But what are they going to do? Drop out of the race? If they drop out of the race, then their competitors are just going to keep going, right?